with one of my staff members, and they'll put you in line to ask a question. If you're listening online, you can submit the questions through the question box at the bottom of your screen. So again, if you're on the phone, just press *3, and that's at any time during the call, and you'll be connected to a staff member, and you can ask, again, you'll go live and you'll ask a question to me, but you'll talk to a staff person first. So before we get into questions, it takes a little bit of time for the number of people on the call to build. So let me just describe really what phenomenal this technology, these telephone town halls are. Again, this is my 77th. In the 76 previous ones, we've dialed out to, we're just shy of 5 million people. This call will put us over the 5 million mark. We've had just shy of 800,000 people join our calls. And in total, I've answered well over 1,000 questions. And today we're calling out to about 80,000 people in Wisconsin. But I don't want that to make you feel all intimidated. When you're on the phone with me, it's like we're talking on the phone. No big deal. And my experience in the previous 76 is these phone calls are very respectful, both from a standpoint of questioning and in the answers I provide. So again, I really don't want you being concerned. I want you to really participate. I really do want to hear your views, and I want to be able to respond to your questions. So again, if you want to ask a question, press *3 at any time during the call. And if you're listening online, submit questions through the question box at the bottom of your screen. It looks like we've already got some online questions. Just a couple of remarks. I think we'll cover these topics, but obviously we're in the midst of this pandemic. I think all of us cannot wait for the pandemic to be over. The human toll, the economic devastation has just been tremendous. I'm hoping we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. I think, again, I was a big supporter of Operation Warp Speed. We produced a vaccine in record time. And so I'm glad so many millions of Americans are taking advantage of that, people around the world, quite honestly, and hopefully that'll really speed the point in time when the pandemic is over. We're obviously going to be talking about the out-of-control spending. We'll probably be talking about the out-of-control situation on the border as well. But unfortunately, the COVID pandemic is just hanging over everybody. It's been here for over a year now, and I'm sure we are all sick of it. And so, again, just hope and pray that it ends as quickly as possible. But with that, our first online question comes from Melissa. And Melissa asks, have you committed to running in 2022? No, I haven't, Melissa. And that may make some people happy on this call, might frustrate some others. But from my standpoint, these campaigns are far too long. The campaigns spend way too much money. And just letting see how things play out and biding my time to make a final decision, I think I'm helping everybody out. The citizens of Wisconsin don't have to listen to all the vitriol. That's really a shame how vicious our politics have come today. I was really quite hopeful after listening to President Biden's inaugural address, how much time he devoted and talked about his primary goal was to unify and heal this nation. That's a really worthy goal. I hope we can really accomplish it. But again, I haven't decided, and I really don't have to decide for quite some time. So, but appreciate you submitting a question online, Melissa. Our first call-in questioner is Jennifer from Fitchburg. Jennifer, thanks for staying on the call. What's your question?
Oh, hi. Can you actually hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear. Yes, thanks for staying on the call.
Hi, Senator Johnson. I just want to thank you so much for your vocalness about the vaccines and standing up to to that being forced on people. It's incredibly important, and I'm so grateful to you for doing that. And honestly, I lean towards being liberal, so I generally haven't been on the same side of what a lot of the things you're doing, but in this area, which I think is the most important area right now facing us as Wisconsinites, is this area. And for this, you've been wonderful, and I'm so grateful to you. So my question, I guess, is what can we do to stop a vaccine passport from being forced on us in Wisconsin?
Well, Jennifer, again, listen, I appreciate you asking your question so nicely, and even acknowledging that we don't necessarily agree. I mean, that's fine. On this one issue, we do agree. Stay tuned. Maybe I can convince you some other things as well. But after HIV, we passed a number of laws having to do with health privacy, which, by and large, I think those are really good laws. I don't know why with COVID we seem to be throwing out all those, privacy protections out the window. And again, I'm a huge supporter of Operation Warp Speed, and I'm really glad that so many Americans are taking advantage of what certainly all the indications are a highly effective and generally safe vaccine. Anytime you inject anything in the body, human beings are different, and so people are going to have adverse reactions. But it's still, percentage-wise, it still seems to be very safe. So I'm really happy that, that is going to contribute to ending this pandemic. But that being said, I also recognize that this vaccine is being authorized through an emergency use authorization, which isn't full FDA approval. I'm the guy that championed right to try because, I realize it takes time for the FDA to really understand the implications of a drug, and you can't substitute time. What is the long-term impact on anything? And so, I was a huge supporter of right to try, which allows people, if there's no other cure, they don't qualify for a clinical trial, but a drug has gone through the first two phases of FDA approval, it should be up to that patient and their doctor, and quite honestly, the drug manufacturer, to decide whether or not they could try something in that kind of desperate situation. And so, to me, this vaccine is a similar situation. I think people have the right to try, but a corollary of that is also the right to choose and not be pressured into taking a vaccine, and certainly not be trapped and be segregated publicly, being able to do certain things or go certain places if you don't have a vaccine. I've come under a fair amount of heat for just stating what I think is kind of common sense and obvious. There's been an awful lot of fear developed over COVID, and I understand it. I don't downplay this. I know people who have suffered seriously from COVID. I'm not downplaying this at all. But at the same time, I think we have to recognize that people have the right to choose, and they have the right to assess the risk on their own. If you're young, if you're healthy, the good news is COVID has not been all that devastating as a percentage basis versus if you're elderly. And so, again, I just think it should be people's right to choose in these areas, and I certainly will vigorously oppose any government use of or certainly imposition of vaccine passports. And I really hope the private sector doesn't impose them either. My final point, I got in a lot of trouble for making this one, but I think it's a reasonable point. If you've been vaccinated, particularly when you see the effectiveness of these vaccines, I mean, it is right around that initial testing results, about 95%. The more information we're getting in, they're about 95% about effective for preventing infection, preventing hospitalization, serious illness, and death. That's a really, really high percentage. So you ought to feel pretty confident that even if you're around somebody with COVID, chances are you're pretty well protected. So I extend that to say, so why would you care? Why would you want to force somebody who might have some misgivings from taking a vaccine? I mean, I just don't quite get that. I'm all about freedom. I'm about the right to try. I'm about the right to choose. And I'm really about patient privacy as well. So, Jennifer, again, thanks for staying on. Thanks for your very nice question. And hope you stick on and I can maybe convince you some other stuff. Quick reminder for people on the call, please press *3 at any point in time to ask the questions. And by the way, so you just witnessed a liberal talking to a conservative and doing it with a great deal of respect. So that's the way these things have gone for the first 76 telephone town halls, and I don't expect it to be any different this time either. So our next questioner is Joshua from West Allis. Joshua, thanks for staying on the call. What's your question?
Okay, can you hear me?
I sure can.
Okay. So, firstly, I've been calling your office regularly for the last several weeks now, and I've mostly been calling during office hours, but I only ever get to leave a message, and I have actually been leaving a message with my email to contact me, but I've never received a response or even any sign that my message has been read and that there will be a response. So to be honest, I'm kind of annoyed by that because I feel ignored. But I'm going to move on to the issue that I've been trying to contact you about, which is I want to know why you voted against the stimulus because, well, I agree that the stimulus was far from perfect, though I think you and I probably disagree on what areas of it were wrong. But again, I agree that it wasn't perfect, but I want to express that the need for it was so immediate and so great that we couldn't afford to wait any longer to tinker with it, to work over what things should be changed, what things shouldn't be changed, because the need was just so great and so immediate. So I've been wanting to know why you voted against it and what was going through your mind when you decided to vote against it. I like I said, I've been trying to contact you on this issue for weeks, and I never received any kind of response.
Okay, but
So I'd like to know now.
Okay, Joshua. So again, thanks for staying on the call. Thanks for your question. In terms of quick responding, we literally get, millions of emails and phone calls. We log them all in. I get a daily report in terms of what issues people have logged in about. But in terms of being able to personally get back in touch with everybody, it's just simply impossible. And I'm very accessible. I issue press release statements. I tell people I'm on radio all the time. We're doing these telephone town halls. So I think people do, in the end, understand what my rationale is. But let me explain on the stimulus. First of all, we don't need stimulus. We have injected now, it's almost $6 trillion of deficit spending into our economy. In 2020, personal savings went up $1.6 trillion. Real disposable per capita income is up 5.5%. On average, the people in the bottom 20 percentile of income earners got on average about $45,000 in some kind of support payments. The individual checks that went out, I know a lot of people call them stimulus checks, but again, with all that money flooding into the market, with people not being able to get out, all the pent-up demand, my concern is certainly sparking inflation. But the fact of the matter is, even in the depth of the COVID recession, we lost about 25 million jobs from a top figure of about 159 million jobs. That was a record. So we were down 25 million in the depth. Within a couple of months, those job numbers had recovered pretty dramatically. And right now we're maybe down 9 or 10 million jobs. And yet, in the first two rounds of those direct payments, we sent checks to 166 million Americans, about 115 million households. Again, we were down 25 million, and now we're down 10 million jobs. Why are we sending checks out to 166 million Americans, checks that we don't have the money to cover? We're further mortgaging our kids' future. So now there's a third round of checks going out. It's targeted a little bit. I don't have the final numbers, but again, I don't know why we're sending out checks written against an account that is empty, and we're going to have to borrow money to people that still have their jobs, that haven't seen a income reduction. And oh, by the way, if you did lose your job, we've been very generous in terms of plussing up state unemployment benefits to the point of the $600 plus up. I've seen different figures, percentages, but something like 5 out of 6 people made more in unemployment than they made actually working their job. Right now, it's about 40% of people, even at the $300 plus up. The biggest problem we have in Wisconsin, we're at 3.8% unemployment. When I took Econ 101 in college, full employment was 5%, so we're at 3.8%. The biggest complaint by far I'm hearing out of employers in Wisconsin is they can't find workers. They can't coax them off the sidelines because we've provided so many benefits, including those what you call stimulus checks. So again, I just thought it was bad economic policy. I am concerned about the immorality of mortgaging our kids' future. I'm happy to help people that need it, and so that's why I voted for the first CARES Act. But when we first started talking about the CARES Act, it was $750 billion within days. That ballooned up to $2.2 trillion. And again, I'm just one person. I ran in 2010 because I thought we were mortgaging our kids' future. Debt was at $14 trillion. Now it's at 28. By the end of this fiscal year, it'll be at 30. If President Biden has his way, it'll be at 32 or $34 trillion. This is completely out of control. So there are already consequences, by the way. If you're a retiree on a fixed income, these ultra-low interest rates, which are being held ultra-low so that government doesn't feel the pain of all this borrowing, you are really suffering from it. And if it sparks inflation, we're already seeing the beginning signs of that, The Consumer Price Index almost up 5% last month on an annual basis. Producer Price Index, which is a harbinger of future consumer price index, almost up 11%. So we're seeing the beginnings of inflation, and inflation really harms savers, people on fixed income, retirees, and particularly people at the lower end of the income spectrum. So again, I know free money is great. I know free money is popular. I hope there's enough people in Wisconsin who respect the fact that I'm willing to take the political grief for being a little more fiscally responsible than just shovel out more money to the constituents. But anyway, Joshua, thanks for a nice question. And our next questioner is Dan from Whitewater. Dan, thanks for staying on the call. What's your question?
Hi. So I had a question about the infrastructure bill that's getting passed through right now. And I noticed that the plan put out by Republicans is significantly cheaper than the initial plan. And you talked about this a little bit just now about financial responsibility. But I wanted to know, how do you expect American infrastructure to stay up to date if you're not willing to spend and invest as much in it?
Well, again, I understand how spending is popular. So certainly my suggestion on the infrastructure, I realize, roads, bridges, locks and dams, the things you'd actually call infrastructure need repair, and they need attention, and they need funding. The problem with the $2.7 trillion, $2 to $2.7 trillion Biden proposal is only 5 to 6% would be spent on roads and bridges. Another about 20% total would be spent on other things you'd consider infrastructure. The rest is being spent on whatever their wish list spending items are. Probably making more Americans dependent on government. My suggestion for the Republican proposal, which is somewhere in the $500 to $600 billion range, really focuses on infrastructure, real infrastructure. Probably spending about as much on real infrastructure as the Biden proposal does. If you really take a look at it, if it's 20% of $2 trillion, that's $400 billion, so spending even more on infrastructure than President Biden's proposal. But my suggestion is, when we passed the $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill that the Democrats jammed through the Senate on a partisan basis, even at that point in time, there's about $1 trillion left unspent from the $4 trillion we had appropriated in 2020. It's hard even for the federal government to shovel out trillions of dollars. So we had $1 trillion left over, not spent, and we authorized another $1.9 trillion. Of that $1.9 trillion, $721 billion. And again, this is COVID relief to address pain and suffering with the pandemic. $721 billion of that $1.9 trillion wasn't even going to be spent till fiscal year 2022 out to fiscal year 2028. Now that's not COVID relief. That's, again, spending money on, liberal wish list items. And so my suggestion for the Republicans is we should pay for our infrastructure bill, and the way we should pay for it is by rescinding the $521 billion that will be spent if we don't rescind it, and repurpose it, reallocate it to infrastructure spending. If Democrats are going to pass a $1.9 trillion spending bill, call it COVID relief, the least they could have done is address infrastructure, but they didn't want to do that because they want to use infrastructure, which is popular. As you're pointing out, I agree with you. We need to spend money in infrastructure. So they thought they'd spend $1.9 trillion, again, $721 billion in the out years, and then come up with a whole new $2 to $2.7 trillion package, and that's just a start. There's going to be another $2 trillion package on some other social good program. Where does this stop? So anyway, that's kind of my 2 cents. We do need to spend money on infrastructure, but my suggestion is let's rescind what wasn't COVID relief, obviously, because it's not even going to be spent till out years. Rescind that, and we'll spend that on infrastructure. Seems to make a lot of sense. So Dan, thanks for staying on the call. Thanks for your question.